I've been a fan of Heston Blumenthal for over 20 years, and no chef has had a bigger influence on me in the kitchen and the way I cook. This Christmas, I wanted to make it special by cooking his perfection Christmas feast. In 2007, he cooked a magnificent dinner for 6 celebrities, and I am determined to reproduce it. Heston is known for wild and wacky combinations, such as snail porridge, crab ice cream, and many, many more. But in reality, he's totally invested in one thing, making the best possible version of a dish he can. His motto under his actual coat of arms is question everything. Question the ingredients, question the technique, question the combinations. His flagship restaurant, the Fat Duck in Bray, once named the best restaurant in the world, has an invention kitchen where he and his team can test out these very ideas. Nowhere is his philosophy more evident than his 2006 series In Search of Perfection, where he takes staple and familiar recipes and examines them to be the best version that he can. Classics such as roast chicken, fish and chips and trifle are all given the Heston treatment. Riding high on his success, he was commissioned to make a Christmas special. His guests were Terry Wogan, Kirsty Walk, Rob Brydon, Sue Perkins, Dara O'Brien and Richard E. Grant. They were treated to a 4-course meal with 4 amuse-bouches that were all pure Heston, the marriage of sceptical thinking, quirky but delicious combinations and a heavy dose of nostalgia. Heston's approach is a huge influence on me, and I wanted to pay tribute to that by attempting to recreate it in my home kitchen. None of these recipes are strictly documented anywhere. As far as I know, they're all one-offs from the TV show, but a lot of them lean heavily on techniques from his other cookbooks and shows, so I've tried to piece it together and done research to attempt them. Make no mistake, I don't think this is going to be easy or straightforward. Heston's recipes are detailed and often involve a lot of waiting around for things to freeze or things to set. I've made a few tweaks along the way to make it accessible for a lowly home cook like me. I don't own a freeze dryer or a packaget, nor have easy access to reindeer milk, but I hope I've captured the magic of a perfect Heston Christmas. First, I guess I treated to an amuse-bouche of what appears to be a glass Christmas bauble, which is actually edible and filled with a salmon mousse.
Salmon and light bulb. That is amazing.
Now, there's no specific Heston recipe we can follow here. However, the idea of clear edible glass as a sugar decoration is quite well known, using liquid glucose as a setting agent. I've had a look around various blogs. You can find them here.
Sugar glass. Oh yeah.
The salmon mousse recipe itself, again, we have no specific recipe to draw from, but lots of ideas from other recipes Heston has. So let's start with our glass baubles, which we can set and allow to harden. First, I'm going to start by preparing some moulds. I've got a silicone bauble hemispherical mould here, which I'm going to grease liberally with oil, really generously. Some of you, if you've been around a while, will recognise that I made Heston's meat fruit in this very same mould. So I'm torn between lining them with film or just greasing them heavily. Let's try just greasing them very, very heavily. So in this pan I've got 112 grams of sugar, 75 grams of water and 75 grams of liquid glucose. I'm going to cook this to about 145 degrees. That's the stage where it should be able to retain its shape. I've got my thermometer ready to go. I'm not looking to rapidly boil this because I don't want lots of colour. What I want to do is retain a nice clear crystal appearance. And I'm checking with 2 different thermometers there, and I think we're at the right stage. I'm going to go slightly around the edge because I want it to form a complete sphere. It's going to be too thick around the middle, I can tell you that one for free. I don't think that's going to set right. So I'm going to flip it and do it the other way. So I think pouring it on the back of the mould has been the way to go, but I'll need to get it out yet. So let's leave that to harden and see what happens. So while that sets, let's make the mousse. That's 50 grams of cream, 3 grams of salt, smoked salmon. I'm using trimmings here because it's super cheap and it's just a thing for a recipe where you're just going to whiz it up. And then just to set it like a mousse, about 3 leaves of leaf gelatin, which I've bloomed in cold water. And that's now got a beautiful cream colour, cream buff rose pink. I'm just going to force it through a sieve just to get a perfectly smooth puree. Get this perfect cream butter. We've actually ended up with something not that dissimilar from cream cheese that you get commercially that already has a smoked salmon flavour to it. So, you know what? You could do that. I don't think anyone would know the difference. You save yourself a hell of a lot of time. You know, for all those people that are making salmon-filled sugar crystals. So after about 15 minutes or so, this was quite hard to touch, so let's lift it up. And that's quite fun. I've got a couple of holes in there, but it feels really thin. It's completely usable. I'll have to chip away at it. I don't know how that will work. Let's see how the stuff underneath did. Oh, you know what? I thought that was going to be a complete disaster, but it's just kind of sat to this baking tray. That's okay, because I consider this a write-off, but if you need to clean anything like this, by the way, just pour boiling water over it and leave it for 10 or 15 minutes and it will just melt down into a sugar solution. Now, I'm not a structural engineer, so I don't quite know how to get these off without shattering the entire dome. So, they come away from the mould. That's okay, I can run up another batch and we'll make them a lot better. We know to use the back of the mould this time. So after 3 separate attempts to cast this sugar mould, I think I've got my best set, which is this one here. I've got all sorts of nubbly bits and a few gaps, but do you know what? I've melted enough sugar. I think I should probably use isomalt, which I think is regarded as the better product for doing this kind of work. But I've got enough where I can get the idea across and see where we're up to. So let me fill that with mousse. Now it's actually, because of the mould I've used, too large a portion. I know on the show they were sort of like single bites. Because it is an amuse-bouche after all, it's not a full course. Is it a perfect result? No. But I'm pleased with the processes I've gone through and understanding what goes into it. I think I would whip the mousse further to get a lighter, airier texture. You know, really beat it with kitchen beaters so that it really fluffed up. And obviously, sugar is what it is. And I've now got an absolute mountain of sugar that I need to melt down. Failed attempts. Let's get into it. I mean, that is quite fun. I imagine if you could colour that as well with food dye, and people would have no idea what's inside, particularly if you've just done one semicircle on a plate. Yeah, the salmon mousse is really light, and whilst the bauble casing is sweet, it's really not a terrible combination. You think it would be, but it pairs off against the saltiness. I hope you enjoyed that. That was the first glimpse into the Heston Perfect Christmas. I want to do the hot and cold mulled wine.
Half of it is hot, and half of it is cold.
And if you like it half and half.
Very difficult to get across on camera, of course. We do have good recipes and analogues for these. For one thing, hot and cold iced tea is featured in the Fat Duck cookbook. A very detailed process and something that was clearly sweated over for a long time to get it just so.
A very long time to develop that to the level that we thought it was good enough to serve.
Helpfully, we also have one of the development chefs who was instrumental in making it, Chris Young, over on YouTube, who very much demonstrates the technique using coffee and involving the great James Hoffman. His technique is actually simplified from the one in the book, so with respect, I'm going to use that one because I don't need any more challenges today. And this is one of those where I really don't have anything to go on as a home cook who hasn't tried anything like this before, I need to essentially make two very similar, I'm going to use the word liquids. Chris Young would prefer we'd say fluid gel, but let's just say liquids for argument's sake. Essentially, you're making a very dilute gel that will sort of hold its shape, and apparently if you don't drink it quick enough, the magic is lost. I'm going to be using a product called Gelan Gum, Gelan F it's also known as, which is a food safe setting agent that will set the mulled wine that I've already bought ready-made. Given this time of year, very easy to pick up. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how this will go, but essentially I need to prepare 2 solutions and then bring them together at the end in the final glass. Got 2 slightly different quantities of Gelan F that I need. I'm just going to measure that out. I've opened that, it's actually in another bag, okay. Quite easily available online. So I need just 0.35 of a gram, which is such a tiny amount, to go with 400 millilitres of mulled wine. And that needs to be whisked in over heat. And to keep it consistent, I'm going to use one of those silly little cappuccino milk frothers. And then repeat, but with 0.5 Gelan into 400 grams mulled wine for my cold solution. So I've got my hot and cold solutions that I now need to completely chill down and refrigerate, essentially for 24 hours. Well, my 2 mulled wine preparations have sat overnight in the fridge for 24 hours. I'm now going to decant the hot one into a bag where I can warm it up sous vide. Don't know if you can see, it's kind of hard to get on camera, but it is liquid, but it's quite jelly-like. According to Chris Young, we need to heat this at 72 degrees C. And there's my bag of cheeky Ribena. Let's heat this through now. And so to complete the hot and cold mulled wine, the cup that I'm going to use needs to be separated, and I've created here a very solid 1% Gelan solution of water, and I'm going to use that to build a template. This idea taken directly from Chris Young's video. Now, the divider is in there because apparently if you taste the difference between the hot and cold too quickly, the illusion's gone. And obviously if I just pour one liquid next to another, they're just going to mix. Same as diluting a hot drink with cold water, right? So you keep that divider in to the last second to preserve the magic, I guess. Chris Young, clever guy that he had 2 squeezy bottles, just using 2 little jugs. Oh, wow. You definitely get the effect. I'm drinking quickly because I understand it doesn't last. Wow. It's so bizarre, and your brain kind of can't take it. I'm astonished how well that's worked. But rather than being left right, as I pour, it kind of goes hot, cold, up and down rather than left and right. What a bizarre drink that is. That's a lot of fun. I don't know how practical it is to do for lots of people at once. And obviously it's an annoying bit of work. But you can see I've just downed a mug of mulled wine. Well, that was a fascinating little treat. If you are interested, I'd recommend you go watch Chris Young's video where he does it with coffee. And that explains far more behind the logic, the reasoning and all the steps. It's really interesting. I really enjoyed that. We look at his mandarin nitro vodka thing. It's an amuse-bouche, so it's literally a bite that they're going to have. Now this is one of those where I'm going to really struggle to reproduce it. This is based on a classic fat duck restaurant dish. Nitro poached green tea and lime mousse. And the story goes that this is Heston's attempt to create the perfect palate cleanser. An almost cloud of green tea and lime so that you are ready for the next dish without being overwhelmed from the previous dish. I'm not going to get my hands on the liquid nitrogen that you need to create this. They do this tableside at the restaurant itself. but I'm not going to get hold of it. It's out of my budget and experience. If I get it wrong, I've got it completely wrong. So I'm just going to go down the mousse angle to hopefully capture the spirit of it. I've read through all of his description in the Fat Duck cookbook, and I think I've got a good handle on what he's aiming for and the sort of techniques that he prefers. This version is not green tea and lime, but a vodka and mandarin flavours that are, of course, a little bit more Christmassy. You might also spot that the air fryer is just sat over there. Well, I'm currently dehydrating some mandarin and lime peel, and I'm going to eventually dry that right down and then blitz it up to form a powder that will form a little dusting over the finished dish. But first, I'm going to make my mousse. So we're whipping up our egg white, just 2 egg whites in there, and the juice from a tin of mandarins, to which I'm adding just 8 grams of vodka. Heston says the sharpness, the clarity of vodka carries the flavour throughout and leaves it refreshing. And to that, I'm going to add some gelatin just to help with the setting. I've just heated it briefly on the hob just to dissolve the bits of gelatin. I'm just going to let it get quite cool. I've got a bit of a balancing act here because the gelatin will want to set it, but I want it cool enough to combine with my egg white. And if I taste it, that is refreshing. It's not sweet like orange juice, but it's got that acidity of mandarin, and I cannot detect any vodka in it. I'm just combining it really well now, the juice and the egg white, but trying not to bash it around. Just want it to be a smooth, uniform mousse. I can't decide yet how I'm going to serve it. I shall put some into a cocktail dish and some into another container, and that'll give me options. Now I'm going to pop this in the fridge for a good few hours so that everything gets suspended in that foam. See you in a few hours. My mandarin mousse has had time to set in the fridge. I've scooped it and I've placed it into the freezer just to fully set. Let's get it out now. Kind of looks like a little puddle of scrambled eggs. Or a little brain, a little orangey brain. For 12 hours I've dehydrated this lime, an entire tin of mandarins. And now I'm going to whiz this up and make a powder. Wow, the aroma coming off those is terrific. But I think a fun seasoning, particularly around the sides here, to decorate my mandarin mousse. Now I know on Heston's programme, and indeed when you have the aperitif at the Fat Duck, you know, the condensation of the nitroglycerin, if I remember that right, condensates inside your head and makes you vaporise steam. But I don't think that's going to happen here. And as a palate cleanser, that's how it should be. There's a burst of fresh flavours and then it's instantly gone. It's a bit like brushing your teeth between meals. And in fact, that's where Heston got this idea. He talked about in a perfect world, you'd brush your teeth between meals, but those minty menthol flavours just linger on in the mouth for ages, you know. Same as if you brush your teeth and then have a glass of orange juice. But this is completely refreshing. Yeah, it's not overly sweet, so you're not feeling like you're eating a dessert, though it's definitely more sweet and savoury. It sounds strange, but there's almost no texture. It just melts and evaporates very, very quickly. And I bet if I was able to do the dry ice version, that texture would be even softer, even more fine-grained, and would literally evaporate when it hits your tongue. Very interesting. The final amuse-bouche, that is a wafer with memories of childhood. This is given scant seconds in the programme, so we don't really know a lot about it. The only things I can go off is it appears to look like a communion wafer, of which of course there are many recipes for this around, but there's no specific recipe for this amongst Heston's bibliography. However, since the publication of the Fat Duck, he has added a dish called Counting Sheep, which is about bringing together childhood memories, and not just childhood, but nursery memories. He wants to make you feel like a baby. Who knows why. But there's no specific recipe of this. There's hints at it in different interviews, articles and Instagram posts, but really we're flying on empty here. So I'm going to go for a communion wafer recipe with simply milk and flour a very, very simple dough baked that should dissolve very quickly. But to capture a great deal of those flavours, I've come across a commercial brand of tea from Pucker that captures a lot of those fragrances in. It's designed to be a restful harmony of sweet and floral notes, and it contains chamomile, fennel, licorice, manuka honey, vanilla. So I'm going to start with that, then add a few more things to make life interesting. So I've got here 100 millilitres of milk, to which I'm going to add one of these flavoured tea bags. To that I'm also going to add some lavender from my garden and a little extra vanilla just to boost the sweetness. Now I'm just going to simmer that gently and then completely turn the heat off and allow it to cool, just to let the flavour steep and infuse. This infusion of milk technique and idea is something Heston does a lot of, so I think this feels, if not the actual recipe, then it feels like the right direction to go in. I've rolled out my dough as pretty much as thin as I dare. And now I'm just going to cut out some little wafery sized treats and cook them in a dry frying pan. Well, I was working blind here, and I think we've ended up with something a bit more like chapatis than wafers, but it's subtle, but those flavours do come through. The chamomile in particular is quite strong. A little bit of lavender. Yeah, not unpleasant, but not one to go out of your way for. Wafer? No, never mind. I've ended up with a small bread rather than a true wafer that dissolves. But interesting nonetheless. And you join me as I'm about to tackle what I think is the most fiddly, difficult and weirdest course of the whole dinner. That's one entitled Gold, Frankincense and Myrrh that, yes, incorporates elements of all three. I need to get cracking with a stock. Now, I did promise no weird equipment. This is essentially a pressure cooker. But there's nothing to stop you doing this on a hob. I'm doing it purely for speed because I don't want to be here all day. Now Heston uses langoustine, incredibly difficult, expensive to buy. So I'm just going to use some decent sized prawns. So I'm adding prawns, onions, star anise and a little water. And I'm going to set that off to make a little stock. It's quite hard when you see this dish, which is extremely flashy, to figure out what's going on. I would say reality, this is a fish soup. That's what we're making here. A very bizarre fish soup. It's not the stock and soup itself that's difficult here, but some of the ingredients. You also have a weird array of garnishes, a bit of egg yolk, and a saffron and coffee bavarois, as well as incorporating gold, frankincense and myrrh into the dish itself, which I can't emulate what Heston's doing directly here at home, so I'm going to have to take some creative license. But I hope I capture enough of what's going on.
You can't make it at home.
So the gold itself, Heston compacts his stock, which is nearly done, into a freeze-dried cube and then wraps it in gold leaf. Well, gold leaf is famously tasteless, so I'm not killing myself too much over that. I certainly don't own a freeze dryer, so I'm instead going to use gold cake spray, which is very widely available, to decorate my dish and give the same effect, really. The other two ingredients, frankincense and myrrh, the programme spends a long time on his no doubt expenses paid trip to Oman to locate frankincense and myrrh. It's one of those things we talk about every single Christmas and I don't really know what they are. So I managed to get some. I do not believe these will be edible, so therefore I'm going to need to incorporate their fragrance, their smell, their aroma into the dish. Let's try them as is. So frankincense smells a bit like amber. It's quite sweet. And now for myrrh. So that's kind of earthy and charcoaly. And what about if I try and smell them together? really perfumed. I could be quite convinced to use frankincense, so I'm going to need to incorporate these in the dish in a slightly more sophisticated way. I'm certainly not going to be carving a spoon out of natural myrrh.
So I've come up with this. It's a teaspoon whittled from what we had left from the myrrh branch that I brought back from my mum.
One of the garnishes is going to be an egg yolk cooked in saffron. So here I have egg yolk, and there is, I promise you, a little bit of saffron in there. You never need too much. And a little hit of oil. And then I'm just going to sous vide this at 74 degrees for about 30 minutes, just to lightly set the egg. Heston loves a sous vide. So here I'm making a saffron jelly. That's a few strands of saffron steeped in a tiny amount of hot water. Then we've got some gelatin, leaf gelatin, bloomed in cold water, drained and then gradually whisked through into the jelly, put into these moulds to set. And then we've got a coffee bavarois. I've got some egg yolk and sugar that I'm whisking together and then beating in a double espresso shot. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of agar-agar. It's a seaweed-based setting powder. It's much more easily available than it sounds. Then going to whisk in some heated cream and then return to the heat just to thicken slightly, and again pour into my moulds. I'll now pop those in the fridge to set. My little buzzer has gone off, so let's have a look at our stock. So we have our prawns, onions and star anise. There's no flavourings or seasonings in here yet, so I guess we'll have to adjust for that. I mean, it's all those three things in that flavour. Slightly briny from our little prawn dudes, a hint of acidity from the onions, and that gentle perfume of star anise. So that's the core broth in our soup. Right, I think it's time to plate. I'm starting with a spray of gold so that it will be spread throughout the whole dish as we add our broth. Some pieces of cooked onion and a few of our prawns. Coffee bavarois and saffron gel. And in a nod to Heston serving, a teapot full of my broth. And I've just got my frankincense and myrrh over a burner where it's gently heating and releasing those aromas. So we have gold, frankincense and myrrh. Well, this one was quite a lot of work. And I have to say, I don't get it. We've got a nice fish broth with bits of egg and bits of coffee, an occasional blast of saffron. It's just a collection of things. I'm fairly sure Heston put in the brief, I want a gold, frankincense and myrrh dish, and then thought about how to do it later, and managed to get himself a trip to Oman out of it. So it's perfectly pleasant, as a soup course goes, but not one I'll be rushing to make again. So you join me as I start to prep a palate cleanser course. Probably one of the simplest that I'll do in this whole series, which is essentially an apple sorbet. But ironically, I don't know how close I'm going to be able to get to it. In multiple interviews, Heston has talked about the nostalgia of Christmas at his uncle's. Indeed, in this show, he talks quite a lot about how he's trying to recapture that spirit of being at his uncle's at Christmas. He tries to incorporate pipe tobacco, which thankfully he abandons. It's really not my style. But he ends up with an apple sorbet. Is again a play on an existing recipe of Heston's. Again, it's a palate cleanser, so it's not designed as a full meal. But we're going to make an apple sorbet with Granny Smith apples. He also serves it on a leather plate. I don't think I have any leather in the house, and I'm in no rush to get some for this particular recipe. We might have to compromise on that one. So for this, I've got 5 Granny Smith's apples, 500 ml of simple sugar syrup, and the juice of a lemon. I'm going to whiz all that together in my food processor. Pass it through a sieve. and then churn to a sorbet. So we're ready to plate up our sorbet now that it's fully churned and set. I've got two things I need to add. Heston was very clear that he wanted to add various smoke flavours to the room to remind him of his uncle's lounge. I tinkered various things, but whilst I said I'm not going to use specialist equipment, I did find this charming little house. This was a gift to me from a friend last Christmas, and you put little capsules in it and it generates a wood smoke smell. So that's what I'm using here. It was found at a Christmas market and it's just a cute little thing to have on the windowsill and will give us the effect we're after. And then for the flame aspect, one of the most important parts, well, Heston made a gelan based ice cream of which it was really difficult to narrow down the recipe. So I made a more traditional sorbet, but then I've gone back to Christmas history, and I bet many of us over the years have had a Christmas pudding lit on fire. Well, the trick to doing that is to warm the spirit gently first in the ladle, set fire to that, and then douse the sorbet. So I gave it a few goes here. So I got small pieces of diced apple for a freshness on the bottom. I then added my sorbet, warmed up the ladle, set fire to it, and doused my sorbet in the hot flame. It only keeps for a second, unlike Heston's, which keeps going for a while, but I think it's good enough to get the idea. So we have that flamed alcohol caramelized flavour on top. So with the smell of the smoke filling the air from my little decoration, the flames have gone on my sorbet. Yeah, fresh and not especially dessert-like, more a bit like our frozen mousse. It's cleansing, especially with the fresh apple underneath, which gives you something to chew on and makes an excellent way to separate one course from another. And of course, we can make it well in advance. So our main course, not turkey, but goose, which is actually super traditional in the UK. Having said that, and it would have appeared on Christmas dinners in years gone by, particularly in Victorian era and thereabouts. However, I don't think I've ever eaten goose. I don't think. Maybe I did once. I don't remember, certainly. I definitely haven't cooked with it. So the first option was to try and find some goose, which was incredibly difficult. And I did eventually, after many attempts, find a butcher that would sell me goose breast frozen, but that's no problem because it allowed me to plan out when to cook this. So I just have a goose breast here, and which I've already peeled off the skin. It was quite easy. So this goose breast itself is going to get cooked sous vide at 54 degrees for about 90 minutes. Meanwhile, I've got the skin, which I'm going to grill off separately. And then we've got leg. Now, if you know your game, or if you know your meats, you'll probably notice this is too small for a goose leg. Again, goose legs, incredibly hard to find. I could buy a whole goose, but the cost for those are astronomical, and I wasn't about to do that for this experiment. So I've got duck leg, not the same, but here's the strange thing. Heston says he takes the goose leg and cooks it for, wait for it, 50 hours. Now, he's well known for cooking things long and low and slow. He doesn't even say how. Does he put it in an oven? Does he sous vide it? He just doesn't say. I'm certainly not going to give up 50 hours of cooking when I don't really know what he's doing or have any real hints at it. So he then, after cooking it 50 hours, shreds the duck leg, much as you get when you go to a Chinese restaurant and order duck with pancakes. So I'm a bit puzzled as to why he went to so much effort only to shred the meat, so you're not really going to get the full effect of it. So I'm just going to give this a standard roast in the oven while this sous vides. So this is going to sous vide and this is going to roast, and I'm also going to at the same time roast off this goose skin as a decoration. I'll see you once they're cooked.
So one of the garnishes is I'll need a black pudding slick, so I'm just blending up black pudding and cream into a puree.
and chestnuts, butter and stock blended together for my velouté. And shredding up my duck leg in the approved method seen in Chinese restaurants up and down the land.
I hesitated about putting the next bit into the video. It's only 3 minutes in and it comes a little bit out of nowhere. I've been making these courses over several days, and this morning I think I'd fit in 3 recipes into one day, and you don't really see the full prep of what I'm doing for this dish. You can kind of see it at the end, but you don't really see what I'm doing. And this is really the culmination of what I was feeling right this second. Hope you get it.
I just recorded this bit to camera because I've been dicing turnip for a garnish for the goose dish, and I just feel like there's too much going on. I just don't want to cook more ridiculous little side dishes that I'm pretty sure I'm going to think are fine and not incredible in any way. That's almost certainly because I don't have the skill, the technique and experience of some of the best cooks and chefs in the world. But I'm just facing it and going, oh, I don't want to make a chestnut velouté or a black pudding slick. But I have committed to it, so I'm going to do it. That's just where my head's at right now. Okay, my goose breast is done, so it's time to start plating. Our black pudding, which should be smooth like a cream, but I just run out of juice, literally. Some mulled wine, which some of you may remember from earlier in the dinner, which I've reduced down. I'm just going to trickle over. Heston makes goose crackers, which he says are just like prawn crackers, so here's just prawn crackers. Some pieces of lightly cooked turnip, some of my rather coarse chestnut velouté on the side, and that's topped with some of that shredded duck leg. That is also supposed to be served on potato puree, but I am out of gas at this stage. There is one final element we need. I've ground some chestnuts into a powder, and I'm now going to infuse the whole dish with a chestnut smoke. So for our final moment of theatricality, the chestnut smoke erupts out of the dish. And we need to give it a try. Now, I'm not going to lie, I have run out of energy. And what a day to discover you're not that fussed about goose. Maybe I prefer it whole roasted on the carcass, the sort of normal way. And a little of this. Chestnut velouté isn't bad, but it's just chestnuts, butter and stock, so very little to dislike there. In fact, this with some shredded duck leg, it'd make a really good filling for like a pie, like a steak bake type pie, a flat one. Petivier, if you want to be a little bit more refined. Oh, and I forgot there was goose skin, which I just baked to a crisp. It's just crackling. It's good though. So, a whole bunch of work there for an unamazing result, and to me, doesn't particularly bring to mind a Christmas dinner. There are bits and bobs I liked. I could take or leave the goose. The preparations are what they are. Black pudding is a good idea, but takes me quite a way away from a Christmas dinner that I know. There's something in the velouté dish, but it's not quite there yet for me. Though I do like the theatricality of the smoke, but you know, I appreciate that's not for everyone. I tried to use as few gadgets as possible, but I did have one I thought I could use. I don't have the refinement, I don't have the skill, I don't have the manpower to do all these dishes justice, and that one was a real demonstration of it. If you've watched other videos where I've cooked Marco Pierre White's restaurant dishes, they're just, that last 5 minutes is horrendous, where everything has to come together hot at the same time. That was a little bit like that. So I'm not in a rush to recreate that one. I fully accept, by the way, you know, I'm just an unskilled, stupid home cook without a lick of training behind me. I've done a lot of cooking, but it's all trial and error. And it shows you the level that these guys can run at. I would be really interested to try the real thing done by the real deal to see just how far off I was. 7 courses down, 1 remains. How will it end? And for our dessert, Heston serves up reindeer milk ice cream with brioche and bacon. Now, actually, it might surprise you to learn I haven't been able to find reindeer milk, but we just need a very high fat milk, and my local supermarket, which doesn't sell reindeer milk but does sell Jersey cow milk, which is about as creamy as you can get in terms of milk. So we've got a milky ice cream. Actually, what Heston's done here, a bit like with a couple of the other dishes, is they are variants on standard if there's such a thing, Heston dishes, dishes we've seen before, and therefore he's made a vanilla ice cream. It's like his scrambled egg and bacon ice cream, which I have made before and I enjoyed it very, very much. So we're going to do a riff on the scrambled egg and bacon ice cream, but I'm going to start with making a standard vanilla ice cream to Heston's usual recipe. That's eggs and sugar, a little hit of vanilla, milk heating through. Once it's warm, return it to the pan and then add it to the ice cream machine to churn. Note, if you don't have an ice cream machine, you can put this into a freezable container and just get it in there with a fork every 30 minutes or so and break it up. It won't be quite smooth, but you'll get the flavour. Another element of this dessert is a brioche loaf with mincemeat. Heston bakes his own, of course. I could do that. I don't really think it's necessary, so I'd pick one up. I'm going to stuff this with mincemeat. If you're inside the UK, you'll know exactly what this is. If you are from outside the UK, hello. Mincemeat doesn't contain animal meat. It used to centuries ago, and over time the meat has disappeared and it's been replaced with dried fruits, essentially, in a thick paste. This is everywhere at Christmas in the UK, absolutely everywhere. Mince pies are a staple. That is a little pie with pastry with mincemeat baked inside. So it crops up in loads and loads of different Christmas style recipes. You get mince pie candles and that sort of thing. Essentially like a rich, sweet, quite strong fruit filling. You could just eat it by the spoon. It's a bit strong though, it's quite full on. It's more of a condiment, I guess. Anyway, let's get to putting this inside my brioche loaf. I could take the whole thing, but I'm not going to. I just want a few slices. So, you know, Heston bakes his and layers it throughout. I think I'm just going to sort of cut a sort of shape, spread it, and then roll it back up again to get the effect. And I've only half thought about how I'm going to do this. I go that far and then start to turn and then just keep turning. I don't know what to do now because that's going to cut it off. Oh, I've done something wrong, but I think, as they say, it will all get fixed. That side to that, yeah, I need to spread it on these sides. Sandwiching that in. I'm going to let it spill down the sides and cover that up. And I'll pop the lid back on in a minute. So I'm going to pop it on there. I'm going to try and compress it down. And squish it into place. I'm being a bit gutless. I wish I'd compress it down further. Get a really tight roll on it. I'm deliberately forming it so you get more of a roll effect. There we go, my mince pie brioche roll. I'm just going to leave that on the side till everything else is ready. And so we have a slice of our brioche with mincemeat in. I'm now going to dip it into egg, let down with a little bit of our high fat milk. Just melting some butter in that pan. So yeah, we're making a version of eggy bread, or pan perdue if you want to give it the posh restaurant name. Heston's a bit obsessed by this dish. It comes up in different places throughout his career. Okay, popping that to one side for a minute. Just going to wipe out the pan just to get the excess up. What are you doing? Get out of there. Now we're just going to melt some sugar to make a caramel that we're going to briefly toast that bread in. Finish that with a scoop of our high fat ice cream on top with a garnish of bacon that I've cooked at a high temperature, dusted with a little sugar. Now that's really good. A really tasty, sweet, puffed up brioche. The tanginess of mincemeat, then that smooth ice cream just coming in at the end just to coat the tongue with sweetness and richness. The bread has that lovely crust on the outside, but it's just so tender in the middle. Now that is an epic finish to that Christmas feast. I absolutely love that. In this video, I'm going to look back over all the courses, all the things I made, how much I enjoyed them, and whether I would do them again, and just see how much of my time was worth it and how much of my time was wasted. Anyway, before that, why this series? Well, I'm an unashamed Heston fan. I've been a Heston fan for well over 20 years. I'm always interested in his recipes. Simultaneously, I've always liked the idea of a sequential video series that happen every single day, and when better to do that than Christmas, which is synonymous with countdowns and Advent and all these kind of things in the air. And I was particularly inspired by the excellent Atomic Shrimp, who did an Advent calendar video series last year, and I really wanted to do that. So I started to look at Heston's Christmas program. It felt like the obvious choice. There are two main programs I could look at. There's Heston's Perfect Christmas from 2007, and there's also Heston's Christmas Feast from a few years later. So I researched and rewatched both programs in anticipation. Perfection looked challenging, but not impossible. The fact that I'm sitting here at the other end of that series proves it's a bit possible. But I did also have Christmas Feast I could have done as well. And his Channel 4 Feast series was really about maximising the food, making it as big as possible, as grand as possible, as sort of as ridiculous as possible. And that's true of this Christmas programme as well, with things like someone fires an arrow into an animal pelt and something falls out that's not blood, but you can drink it. I can't quite remember the details, but there's lots of really bizarre stuff in there that I really couldn't do at home. And also, he doesn't go into anywhere near the detail you need in order to recreate these at home. So that left me with the Perfection series. The Perfection series seems kind of cute in retrospect, with the special guests involved. All really good choices, all people I would love to have a dinner party with as well. That helps. And in case you're wondering, I did reach out to those that have a public social media profile, but alas, didn't hear anything back from them. And it was really a passion project. It was something I wanted to do. There's a good chance this series will do okay, but not amazing. They won't be some of the biggest hitters ever on my channel. And due to the length of the video, I won't make fortunes and fortunes from them. And that's okay. This is definitely a passion project that I needed to get out there. So let's have a look at the courses one by one, and I'll tell you how enjoyable they were and how tasty they were. So we start with the salmon bauble. That is a glass bauble filled with a salmon mousse. So you'll have seen in the video, I had quite a few attempts at getting that sugar work right. I've never really dabbled in sugar work. If you've got experience in sugar work, you might find this a little bit easier than I did. I used a slightly too big mould, but I wasn't about to go and buy 50 different moulds to find the right size. You probably want something sort of golf ball sized. And also I would recommend using isomalt, which is a product much more flexible, literally, for working with sugar work. But the salmon mousse itself was tasty, though as I commented, I didn't feel like I'd made a product that dissimilar to cream cheese flavoured with salmon. I reckon if you get cream cheese flavoured with salmon and then whip it with a hand blender, you know, you'll end up with a lovely whipped texture that you can pipe into these glass baubles. And again, if you're experienced with sugar work, you'll probably find this fairly straightforward. If I wasn't so worried about how fragile it was, I would have also slightly melted the edges and put the bauble together, but I wasn't about to push it, as you saw numerous difficulties with trying to create that. Overall, very, very tasty. 8 out of 10. Would I do it again? Me personally, no. Probably a 5 out of 10. That gives us a score of 13. Next, the hot and cold mulled wine. And that's where the drink is divided. One side is hot, one side is cold. I was really looking forward to attempting this, but I didn't think it would come off. I thought it'd be one of those things that there's more tricks to it than you realise. That's actually really challenging. Turns out, if you just get hold of a sachet of Gel & F, it's really easily available online, eBay, health food stores, and not riotously expensive either. It's really easy, you just follow the ratios. And again, I really call out Chris Young's video here, which was enormously helpful. And it's fun. You can only really do it once. You know, it's not something you're going to break out every single day. And it is for fun, it's not for general drinking. Speaking of which, cheers. I just used a bottle of mulled wine. I had enough going on. And it was, hey, a nice mulled wine and really interesting. So tasty, 9 out of 10. Would I do it again? Yeah, 9 out of 10. Like I said, not every day, but if I wanted to have a bit of fun with some guests one time, I'd do that. So the vodka and mandarin frozen mousse. Supposed to be done with nitrogen, of course, but I wasn't able to get access to that. So I made some concoction that was approximating that. I won't really know if, I don't think I would have got anywhere near the texture without that instant freezing that liquid nitrogen creates. Therefore, I think the taste of it is perfectly nice, and it is what it is. 5 out of 10. Would I do it again? Probably not. I'd love to do it with liquid nitrogen, so I'm going to say 2 out of 10. Nothing wrong with it, but, you know, I did what I could to get close to it. A wafer that tastes of a newborn baby. Very challenging in terms of it's given it almost no time in the programme. It's here and it's gone. So I didn't have an awful lot to go on. I probably could have found a better communion wafer recipe. I also, to make it more dissolving, you know, the way that you can put those on your tongue and they just dissolve in a matter of moments. So there's probably quite a lot more processes involved in that. I'm happy with the flavour. I can't really tell if I got anywhere close to it because the descriptions of it are so vague. Was it tasty? It was fine. 4 out of 10. Would I do it again? Probably not. 1 out of 10. Gold, frankincense and myrrh. This is where I hit my first real roadblock, trying to accommodate all these ingredients. I already knew it was going to be difficult bringing together all those odd, unusual things. I thought I had some various good proxies in place, using the gold spray, for example, and finding crystals of frankincense and myrrh to burn. I was quite happy with that. But a lot of the elements were very strange, and clearly I don't have the skill of a Heston and his team to assemble all these random ingredients, seemingly random ingredients, and pull them together into a cohesive, coherent dish. So you end up with a fish soup and lots of odd things in it. I suspect it's nothing like the real thing. Was it tasty? It was fine. 3 out of 10. Would I do it again? Definitely not. But I think what's important is to pick out things you learn that you can repeat another time. And I really enjoyed having the frankincense and myrrh aroma around when I was drinking that. And the presentation of the tea I was quite pleased with using a teapot. So would I do it again? No, probably a 2 out of 10. The hot sorbet, another challenge, but I think I gave it a damn good go. Making a apple sorbet. No real recipe given for this in the program other than sort of vaguely describing what he's making, but no ingredients. So I've just gone with a generic apple sorbet recipe, and then setting fire to it is a lot of fun, reminiscent of a Christmas pudding. No, it didn't hold its flame for a long time the way it does in his version, but I was happy enough with what I got. That again talks about a gellan based sorbet, but I've got no recipes for that anywhere, so I wouldn't even know what to start with in terms of how much to use. So was it tasty? Yeah, really tasty actually. About 7 out of 10. Would I make it again? Probably not. A 4 out of 10. And so the goose dish, the Christmas goose. I had trouble finding the ingredients. I struggled understanding the story of the dish. I struggled to understand what everything did together. And I basically ran out of enthusiasm for the thing halfway through. I didn't even create all the garnishes I was supposed to. I'd done enough and I was like, I'm just done with this recipe. Did I give it a fair shake? Yeah, could I have done more? Probably, but I was over it. I'd had enough with that particular dish. The goose was fine. It didn't really do anything for me. My first taste of goose that I know of. I don't know that sous vide without any other fats going on is the way to cook it. And some of the garnishes were just annoying me. However, we did end up, as I said during the video, with an interesting combination of a sort of chestnut puree, velouté, with that shredded duck meat, which I think would genuinely make a really good and festive type pie or petivier, flat pie, that I think would be really nice. So there's something to explore there, which is, I think, what a lot of this is all about. Not necessarily being the most perfect recreation of a dish, but being able to find new things and new ideas. So was it tasty? I've got to give it like a, really I'm going to give it like a 1 out of 10. It's just, would I do it again? Absolutely not, a naught. I'm not going anywhere near it. And finally the reindeer ice cream, which obviously reindeer, I didn't use reindeer milk, surprisingly short supply in my corner shop. So making an ice cream, fairly standard stuff, which I then kept really light and creamy and vanilla-y, and then stuffing the mincemeat into a brioche loaf, carving into slices, treating like eggy bread essentially, caramelizing with sugar. Fantastic combination of flavors and different textures, the crispiness, the chewiness, the softness, had everything. I thought it was an absolute knockout dish. And as I said for the goose, you know, it's good to take ideas from this and think about what else you did. Well, I actually, a few days later, turned that into a bread and butter pudding. I took slices of that brioche loaf, coated it in custard and baked it in the oven and made a really rich but fun bread and butter pudding with mincemeat running through it. So for taste, it's a 10 out of 10. And would I do it again? Absolutely, 10 out of 10. And it's really great to finish on a high, particularly following the goose dish. Where do we stand after all that? Well, I enjoyed the process. I certainly like being on the other end of that process, having done it. Though as you can see from the videos, there were some moments testing my patience somewhat. But there's definitely bits and pieces in there I will pick up and use elsewhere in my cooking. Not day-to-day stuff, but you know, those Saturday type cooking, that weekend cooking when you've got a bit more time to experiment and explore. Well, that was personally really satisfying for me. I hope you guys all enjoyed it out there. And I guess all that remains for me is to say thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic Christmas.